Okay, so welcome back to the channel and welcome to part 2, answering the question, how can one have a successful fashion business? How can someone become a successful fashion designer? All the good jazz. If you haven't seen part 1, I'll actually leave an eye icon so you can see it, and I'll also leave the link to that in the description below. So I don't want to beat around the bush, so we're going to go straight into it. And I think the first thing we're going to talk about is website and searchability. And now, so one of the most important things, especially if you're going to have a brand that has a website and you're going to sell things online, which is probably most brands, then you have to start thinking of SEO. SEO, I'm sure most people know what it is, but if you don't, it's search engine optimization. And what that means is how well the search terms of your website rank in terms of when people search for it. So for example, is it a chore for me to find your brand online? If that's the case, then you're doing something wrong and you really need to look into SEO. But there are deeper things that go into it. So in my opinion, if you're going to start a fashion brand, I don't think you can just name it anything. I think you have to really consider a lot of things before you name it. First of all, does someone own the copyright to this thing I'm about to name my brand? What's the competition in terms of searchability? So if your brand name is something that it's a word that not a lot of people use, not a lot of people have searched for, that's a very good thing, because it means when you start your website and you start your brand and people Google that search term, the only thing that comes up is your brand and nothing else. That's a very good thing. You don't want to be in a position where you've named your brand something that's similar to a hugely established brand like Dior or Gucci, because no one will ever find your brand, because anytime they search for it or they try to find it, so many other things are going to come up before your thing comes up. So it's very, very important to consider these sort of things. My rule of thumb is that if me as a person, if it's difficult to find my own brand, then, and my brand in this case would be my magazine online or the Fashion Archive. If I searched the Fashion Archive and I didn't come up, that's a big problem. And that did happen at first until I fixed it. And someone else told me about SEO years ago. So I think that's an important first thing to consider. Secondly, we need to talk about shipping, because especially if you have an e-commerce site, one of your most expensive costs will be shipping. And so you have to think of savvy ways that you're going to do your shipping. You have to think of what are the cheapest ways for me to ship. You have to build relationships with shipping companies. So over time, maybe they can give you discounts. That's definitely something that has happened with me. And also there are some long-term deals that you can do in terms of getting shipping to be cheaper. And so I think if you're going to start a brand and if you want it to be successful, success most times is to do with, like, I don't know, finances and things like that. You really want to make sure that you have good profit margins. And I think one of the best ways to have good profit margins is if you look deeply at the ways you're going to ship your items. The third thing I'm going to talk about is stockists, because yes, D2C, which is direct to consumer, yes, it's very good if everyone can sell 1 million pieces of clothing from their own website. But for most people, that's not really realistic, and that's not going to be the reality. So to improve your profit margins, to increase revenue, you're going to have to start considering stocking in different stores. And as an emerging designer, as a newer designer, you have to do a lot of research into what stores actually help emerging designers, what platforms help emerging designers. So if I was to think off the top of my head, at least in the UK, there are stores like Machine A or stores like Browns that cater. They don't specifically cater, but they do help emerging designers, and they're known to support new brands. So I think as a new designer, if you're not doing research into that, I don't think you're serious in having a successful brand. If you're not looking at, what are my options? What are the things that, are going to help me? Who are the people that would help me in the position that I'm in? You have to consider that. Showrooms are also really important, because if you have a good showroom where buyers go to, then there's a higher chance that you could stock in a store. And there are places like One Granary that have showrooms for emerging designers. There's also initiatives for designers like Fashion East or things that the BFC does or different prizes for emerging designers. So you just have to look out for all of that stuff. The next thing I'm going to talk about is production. So of course, production being manufacturing, where and how you're going to make your clothing. Now, of course, this will also be a very, very heavy expense. And an important term to think of is economies of scale. Because that, of course, will affect your price. You always want to have a competitive price, but however, if you can't have a big enough economies of scale, maybe you should save up first before trying to launch your brand. And to go deeper into what I mean by that, because that could be kind of vague to a lot of people, it could just sound like jargon. Essentially, the more of an item you produce, the less that the cost per item costs you to make. So for example, if you go to a specific factory, and this is all just like made up figures, and you say, I want to make a certain trouser design and I want to make 100, the factory might tell you, okay, it's going to cost you £10 each to make each trouser. So your total cost will be £1,000. However, if you decided in the same factory, the same trousers that you were going to make 1,000, instead of them charging you £10 per trouser, they're probably going to charge you less, maybe £8. So now you've saved £2 per trouser. So if you can increase the amount you produce within reason of what you think is, you know, a realistic target for the audience you have and what you think is actually going to sell, I think it's really important that you try to maximize that. So you don't spend too much on your cost per unit. And there are so many ways you can improve this. From my personal experience, anytime you go and see people, you talk to people, you always get a discount. In my personal experience, if I buy something online, I'm never going to get a discount unless they're doing an online sale. But if I go into a store, I have a chat with the owner, a chat with the people that work there, I might not get a discount that first time, but if they see my face a second time, a third time, we kind of build a sort of relationship-ish, I start to get discounts. And that's the same with factories. If you go to the same factory and make your clothes there, over time, you'll build a relationship to the point where they'll be like, oh, you've been my customer for a while, we've made so much money together. Instead of me charging you £8 per trouser, this time I'm just going to charge you £6, or I'm going to ship all these orders to your factory for free or to your home for free. You're always going to get perks if you build relationships, and that's with everything that I'm talking about. Shipping, stockists, showrooms, buyers, everything. You really, really have to spend a lot of time building relationships in the fashion industry if you want to get anywhere. It's really important. The next thing I want to talk about is press, and that's going back to the last video I was talking about, where if your brand doesn't really have an audience, then no one is really going to buy your clothing, because if there's no one knows that the clothing exists, then no one's going to buy it. And so press can really help with this, whether that's being featured in magazines or being featured in many different media outlets or those sort of things. I think it's good to have a relationship with people who are in press. Press has evolved. Before that meant fashion magazines. Now it could mean YouTubers, it could mean TikTokers, it could mean Instagrammers. And I feel like if you spend a long time building relationships in terms of press, you don't have to spend stupid amounts of money on marketing that a lot of big companies do and just waste their money, in my opinion. You can just leverage your relationships. Like, you have friends that are really cool and they could model for your brand, for example. That's one way that you can really grow your brand in terms of visibility. And it's not just about take. I think it's all about give and take. So if people help you, you also have to think of ways you can help others, especially when your brand starts to grow. How can you help emerging designers? How can you help other up-and-coming models when your brand has a big platform, for example? So it's not just all, I'm going to build relationships and I'm just going to use people. I think there has to be some sort of give and take in every sort of relationship. But these are more commercial relationships I'm talking about. I'm not talking about friendships. There shouldn't be like a give or take sort of thing in a friendship. This next one is really important, and I think it's something that a lot of people that start fashion brands don't consider. But it's also very expensive, and it's the legal side of things. Now, of course, it's very hard to afford the legal things. I had my company, The Fashion Archive, for years before I copyrighted the name and started to copyright all sorts of things, because I just couldn't afford it. But I think immediately you can afford it, or immediately your brand starts making a lot of money, I think the next step is to start thinking of how you can start to speak to lawyers and get a lot of your stuff patented and copyrighted, because that will protect you in terms of bigger brands taking your ideas or just using your ideas without being able to compensate you financially. There's a scam I actually read about some time ago where a lot of people were suing people in America. And what they were doing is they would look at successful companies and see if they have copyrighted their name. And if they haven't, then they would build a whole company that's similar with the same name and then sue them that, oh, this company is like using my name. And some of them actually won those court cases, which is so insane that like the legal world is that messed up that they haven't fixed things like that. So I just think when it comes to the legal side of things, you have to be really, really careful, because there are so many people that are so savvy and so many scammers when it comes to legal things. And if you don't have the right legal protection, things can get really ugly really quickly. So I think once you can afford it, definitely an important thing to consider. And the last thing I'll talk about, and I'm going through these points very quickly because I don't want to beat around the bush, is customer service. Probably one of the most important things, because just because you've sold to someone doesn't guarantee that they're going to come back. What can guarantee it is if they have a good customer service experience. And I can use myself as an example. So, of course, as you guys know, I have a fashion magazine. Launched it a while ago, over a month ago. And I shipped out all the orders. And I had a deal in place with the shipping company that I'm with. Until now, I still get messages that people haven't received their orders. I have some orders that have been lost. I have some orders that have been returned for some reason because like people's addresses, they didn't like put the right address in the website. Now, all of this is none of my fault. I did what I was supposed to do. I shipped people's orders and I used the address that they put on the website. However, that is not the customer's problem. The customer paid money, and at the end of the day, they should get what they paid for. So in my example, I'm actually shipping new orders to people who haven't received their orders, essentially. And yes, that's going to cost me more money. Yes, I'm losing profit. But it's not really about that. I think customer satisfaction is really important. And I think if someone buys something, if someone is going to spend money on your product, I don't care how little, even if it's $1, I think all customers should be treated with respect, and they should be considered, and their complaints should be considered. And if there's something that they're struggling with, I think you should do everything that you can to help them. I think so many brands, and so many fashion brands especially, have been made and broken. As I was saying, as there's this crazy drilling noise in the background, I think a lot of fashion brands have been made and broken based on customer service. So I think it's something really important to consider. But on that note, I'll be back with another video very soon. I have to talk very fast because there's a crazy drilling sound in the background. A lot of construction work happening. This is real life, guys. This is life. Comment down below other tips that you think would be useful to people who want an answer to this question. And on that note, I'll be back with another video very soon. This drilling noise is getting on my last nerve. I'm so sorry about this noise.
It's not like I had low. It's not like I had low expectations, but like it's blown my expectations away.
What about it? You can be truthful. You don't just because it's on the channel. You don't have to like pretend.
The quality of it, innit? Like I think you just get a lot for what you pay for, in my opinion, anyway. Yeah. Like it's literally a book. Like you call it a magazine, but it's a book that people are buying. So I think that's cool. Really cool, actually. And there's lots of people who in here as well who like. Maybe they follow me or I follow them or I know of them, but like I haven't sat down and spoken to them before.
Right.
So it's almost giving me conversations with people I already know, but a conversation I might not have had with them.